In 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And welcome everyone to this episode of the Real Leaders Podcast. Welcome everyone to this episode of the Real Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Edwards. Joining us today is KT Overbey, the President and Executive Director of OneSight. KT, a pleasure having you on today.
Hi there, Kevin. It's great to be here.
It's fantastic. Now, KT, I send out the guest invites to people and I had them come up with a title. And the title you came up with was Unlocking Potential for 1.1 billion people. Who are those 1.1 billion people?
So, Kevin, that unleashing the potential for 1.1 billion, that is what OneSight does. The 1.1 billion people refers to the number of people around the world who need access to eye care and glasses and simply don't have it. And we are completely committed to overcoming that barrier and ensuring that they all get the eye care and the eyeglasses that they need.
So that's an interesting factoid, especially for a lot of people growing up in the States. 1.1 billion people around the world who need access to glasses, don't know how to get them, it's too far to get them. What are some obstacles that come in the way from these 1.1 billion people being able to receive glasses?
So there are a number of obstacles. And, you know, what's interesting, Kevin, is what so many people are not aware of is how hard this is for people. And that's true even in our own communities. So we refer to it as the 3 A's. So the first is physical access. So there may literally not be a doctor in the area. Or in the case of communities in the US or Europe or places, there may be a doctor, but people might not be able to get to it, right? They don't have public transportation or they can't get off work. The second A is affordability. So maybe you can get to the doctor, but maybe you don't have vision insurance or maybe they don't take it. And then the third is actually just awareness, because a lot of people just think the world is blurry and they don't realize that, you know, the vision is the issue and that there's something they can do about it. I'll tell you what, in the US alone, 1 in 4 school children has an undiagnosed vision problem. And people don't even realize it. And, you know, we hear all these stories about children who get diagnosed with learning disabilities or other behavioral issues. And it's just, they just can't see the board. So again, we are all about how do we make sure that people get the care when they need it? And then if they need glasses, they get them.
1.1 billion people. Let's stick to one of those A's, awareness. So for us, awareness, we're getting out there on social media platforms. We try to go into YouTube, to LinkedIn, the Twitter, places like this. We do email marketing. We do messaging.
Yeah.
How does your messaging or awareness campaigns differentiate from a US, those 1 in 4, to a place like Rwanda?
So, you know, you're hitting on such an important issue, right? Anytime you're trying to reach people, you have to make sure that it's appropriate to that community or that set of people. So, you know, in places in sub-Saharan Africa, we do a lot of work through radio messaging, sometimes text messaging. We work with local communities to do outreach events where we literally can bring people together and bring the care to them and help them understand that there are options available.
And when you came into this role 3 years ago, OneSight, what was the vision for OneSight? And how important has articulating that vision to your members and your communities all throughout the world been for OneSight?
So OneSight has a long history, and it's been very true to this mission since it was created in 1988. OneSight actually began as a volunteer effort by some LensCrafters employees who wanted to help local school children. And it's grown by leaps and bounds since then. As you mentioned, we operate all over the world now. And, you know, we've had incredibly strong sponsorship from LensCrafters and then Luxottica. About 4.5 years ago, OneSight spun out to be an independent 501c3 organization. And that was about the point that they brought me in. As you said, I joined a little over 3 years ago. And so the mission hasn't changed at all. I think the vision is, how do we make sure that we can continue to scale that impact so that we can reach as many people as possible and, you know, bring the gift of clear sight to people all around the world?
So let's help our audience understand and conceptualize what that looks like on the ground in these 11 locations in Southeastern Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, places that are a little bit more remote than we may think. Conceptualize that for our audience listening to this.
Sure. So we actually do our work through two programming models. So what you're referring to is what we call our sustainable programming model. And this is what we consider to be a true long-term solution to the problem. So we operate vision centers in actually 10 countries around the world. And what we do is we partner with often local governments, and we set up vision centers, permanent vision centers in district hospitals throughout the country that enable that everyone would have access to them.
Okay.
We hire local people, and we train them in the skills, whether that be the clinical skills, the running of the optical shop, or the manufacturing skills. And then we make sure that that business gets up and running to where, the revenues from the sale of glasses, which of course we make sure are affordable to the community, supports the ongoing operational costs. And then importantly, we make sure, again, that all of those skills are in place. And then we step back and we serve in an advisory or a supportive role. But what we've left in place is an ongoing solution, by the country for the country. Having said that, we also know that that's not going to be the right solution for every population all the time. There are some areas where there's a much more urgent need and the sustainable model doesn't work. So for example, we do a lot of work with refugee populations and in refugee camps. We do a lot of work in disadvantaged communities, again, right here in the US. And in those cases, we follow what we call our charitable programming model. And we will literally take a team of volunteers and we'll show up for a day, 2 days, a week, 2 weeks. We'll work with local partners who help us identify the people who are in the greatest need. And they will come, they get a full comprehensive eye exam. If they have some other issue, like cataracts or glaucoma, we make sure that they get the care they need and we get a referral for that. But if they need glasses, we actually make those glasses on the spot and give them out to those people free. So
it's incredible work that you all do. And for people listening to that, out there, check out the website, check out the videos. And real quick, how do people get involved if they want to help out here in the States or outside?
Well, we actually really welcome involvement. And so, you just mentioned our website. Would love it if everybody would go check that out. It's www.onesight.org. And in particular, if you want to get involved, you can go to onesight.org/engage. As I said, we're always looking for volunteers. And we're always looking for people who want to get involved. Maybe they want to give back in their community. And we look for ways to partner to do that.
So I'm looking for the business case for this as well. And we spoke before the show about, some of the results that happen in local communities when people have a better set of eyes on them. What are some of the results or, some of the indicators for business folks listening out there, business folks in the communities that don't really realize a lot of their employees and workers don't have the correct vision that they need?
So this is the thing that to me, Kevin, is so powerful.
Yeah.
So I always tell people this is about so much more than giving somebody a pair of glasses, right? It's about helping a child to read. It's about helping somebody continue in their job so that they can support their family and give back to their communities. We know that children with clear sight learn twice as well as children who are suffering from vision problems. And, we all know the impact of education and future opportunities for children and an ongoing impact to society. So for us to have the opportunity to help a child see clearly and really get their full learning potential is so critical. But even beyond that, you talk the business case. Last year, a worldwide report looked at this, $410 billion was lost in global productivity due to poor vision. So, we know that workers are, 30% more productive and can earn more. And then you start looking at things like road safety, right? And so, if you've got a business where someone is driving a truck, or you rely on people who are driving, or even just thinking about the safety of people walking down the sides of roads, particularly in some countries where we know we've got a lot of people on the roads, it makes an enormous impact.
So what intrigues me as well is that, you mentioned that this started from a few employees at Crafters who
Mhm.
wanted to help. Explain that to me a little bit, and what the original intention was of these employees.
Well, literally, it started with a handful of people who knew the power of clear sight because it was their business.
Right.
And they said, we know that there are people who need this care and today can't get it. So it's the premise of everything that OneSight does. And again, they started out by recycling glasses and handing them out. That model has since evolved because we know that we want people to be able to choose the style and the fit of the glasses that fits best for them, so that they will in fact wear the glasses and have that prescription be really set for them. But again, so this was founded by LensCrafters and Luxottica, and again, they've been our founding sponsor since. But the idea that we can leverage the power of the optical industry, but also so many other partners who've come forth to work with us in this, to really give back to our communities and strengthen our communities. And as you referenced, it's really a virtuous cycle, because the people that we're helping in the communities are also our future employees. They're our future customers. They're our future leaders.
I was having a discussion the other day about the circular economy, and the reason I asked that is because it seems like they were recycling these glasses. So did Lens Crafters adopt this new model and integrate that into their net operating margin, or was this more so they wanted to have this new subsidiary and have more philanthropic work? Because it seems like a good business model. We don't want to waste these glasses, and we can certainly make some money, but what they wanted to do intentionally was give them away. Is that?
So I can't speak to the financials of what they were doing back in the 80s and 90s. I wasn't part of the operation, but what I can tell you is it was absolutely rooted in the philanthropic desire to bring clear sight to everyone. And I think that continues to this day.
Okay. Well, yeah, it's just always interesting because, if you're like a banana producer and you're throwing away bananas, there is ways to like upcycle these things and make more money out of them. I was just interested to see kind of how that worked from a lens perspective, be it that prescription glasses are so difficult to get. Like how many glasses go unrecycled like each year, I guess is what I'm curious about.
Well, again, I can't speak for the entire industry. What I can tell you is that we try to focus as many of those lenses and frames to the people in need as much as we can. And that's part of the reason that both at our vision centers as well as in our charitable programming, we actually bring all of the equipment to make sure that we are getting the right prescription for the person. We have a full, set of frames that they can choose from. So we make sure they get the right fit. And then we put them together right there on the spot. So nothing goes to waste, because we know that we're getting, the right set of glasses for the right person.
And I think that's also important from like contributors expected. Be it a nonprofit, you're transparent with your financials. Like, how does being transparent with where the money's going? Do you think that has an effect on how much contributions you get a year, or is it a specific individual that's actually looking for that?
No. I think that's very important. And at OneSight, we are fully committed to transparency. We always have been. We've actually received the highest rating through Charity Navigator. Since we've been an independent entity that's been rated that way. And so, we believe it's important to show people that we are good stewards of contributions and that we're making the greatest impact that we can. So we always hold ourselves to the highest benchmarks of the percentage of funding that goes directly toward our programming impact.
And what are some constraints that you've run into with your time here now? Is it the operating costs? Is it distribution? Is it the payroll? Is it putting those things together? What are some things that you've run into?
I think, and I'm just going to say this from a pre-COVID standpoint.
Yeah.
But I think our biggest challenge has been getting the word out to people about not only how big this problem is. Again, 1.1 billion people around the globe. For perspective, that's 1 in 7 people, on our entire planet. So helping people understand how big of an issue it is. And then also some of what we were talking about before, why that's important and the downstream impact that can have on so many aspects of life, whether that be productivity, as I mentioned, or, the opportunity for everyone to have equal access. There's gender equity issues and just overall breaking the cycle of poverty.
What about the gender equity issues though? In these, is it in the United States? Is it in different places? What do you mean specifically by that? And how's
Well,
that
so
pertain to class?
specifically, we know that
Yeah.
there's actually a higher percentage of people who have vision issues and who don't get the care they need amongst women and children.
Ah,
So, so we see that, and we see that play out in so many of the other areas, whether it's, equity to, equitable access to education, equitable access to healthcare. We want to be a part of the solution for that. When we look at, the United Nations has Sustainable Development Goals. And when you look at across all of them, vision isn't specifically mentioned in any one of them, but it is directly linked to multiples. Again, whether it's road safety, access to education, access to, being able to have a good living wage, productivity, gender. There's so many ways that it ties in.
KT, when I watched the videos of your employees, I think the video was in Rwanda, just when they speak with such conviction, with such passion about what they do. Do you think that has an impact on your overall result as well, that people are tied to this mission, that they truly care?
No doubt about it. So the first thing I have to say is OneSight is just an incredible team. The people around the world who work directly with OneSight have, they have a passion for this mission and they're committed to it because we've all seen the direct impact it makes on individuals. And then we're very, very fortunate that more broadly, we have, an enormous army of volunteers, of people who have been involved with this. And again, once you see somebody put on a pair of glasses and be able to see the face of their child clearly for the first time, you get it, right? And you see people break down in tears because they can read again. They're like, oh my God, I can keep my job. It has such a profound impact. And when you're doing this work, you see that you're a direct part of that. And so absolutely, I'm so honored to be able to work alongside this team of people who are so committed to, the impact that we make together.
That's a crazy statement I've never heard before. When you're able to see, your family member for the first time, clearly it's transformational. What you've been mentioning impact. This is what it's all about. What does impact mean to you?
Impact to me, I look at it on a couple of levels. One is truly the impact to the individual, because at the end of the day, we're all individuals, occupying this earth together, right? And so, if I can help even one person, I feel like I've sort of helped make our world a little bit better. But when I think more broadly about impact, again, there's real data out there that show that, you can really make a tremendous, positive momentum by enabling people in the way that we do. And so when I think about the impact of OneSight, that is where we really focus, is how do we spread this impact to as many individuals and unlock their human potential so that we can unlock sort of our community potential, if you will.
It's a pretty bold statement, like transforming one person's life is, that's what makes me happy. Is that something you were taught in business school? Is that something that you've kind of just come to a realization upon? Like, how reflective are you in terms of understanding why you do what you do? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I've actually given it a lot of thought. I was brought up sort of with the belief of, to whom much is given, much is expected. And, when you travel around the world, like I have, and worked in many different communities and visited refugee camps and things, you realize that, for many of us, just by virtue of being born where we are, and not having ongoing wars or, constantly wondering about hunger or things like that, we've been given a lot just from that. And so therefore I do feel a personal responsibility to try to give back. And, I spent the majority of my career, the first part of my career, in the private sector. And I was really fortunate to work for some amazing companies. I spent, almost 16 years at Procter & Gamble. And, I had the opportunity to work on a lot of different projects. But when I reflected, I realized that those projects where I felt like I was truly improving somebody's life were the ones that I was most passionate about. And not coincidentally, probably the ones I did my best work on. And so for me, I made a very conscious decision to move into more mission-focused work, first in the area of public health for a while, and then ultimately here at OneSight.
So let's stick on this timeline. When you come over to OneSight, what were some of the first things you realized, oh, it's different over here? What was different about the nonprofit, sector versus the for-profit? How'd you learn and apply different things from a leadership lens?
Sure. So, I have to say in some ways, yes, there are differences, certainly in terms of some of the key metrics and things like that, right? But at the end of the day, wherever you work, there has to be a purpose. There has to be a mission that drives some of the key strategic choices. And I have found that to be true in almost everywhere that I've worked. And so, for me, as I came into OneSight, it was that vision and the potential impact I could make that was a huge draw. But at the same time, especially because we have this sustainable programming model, which is run as a business, and really having to understand a lot of the business paradigms and models that go into that, there was a lot of transfer knowledge that came in with that. And so, for me, part of the importance of this is the fact that this is sustainable and ongoing. And so I do think that actually there's a lot of similar lessons and skills that draw from the for-profit world.
Sustainability is something that people define differently. How do you think about sustainability? You think about longevity and viability versus renewable? How do you think about sustainability?
So you're right. It's a word right now that has probably a million different definitions, and it's actually something that's an ongoing conversation for us at OneSight. When we think about sustainability, we think about something that literally can go on beyond our direct impact. So again, when we go in, we set these up, we provide all of the initial inventory, all of the initial equipment. I mentioned before, all of the training. So we make that investment to get everything set up for excellence. But ultimately, it's going to live far beyond, our being there. Again, from a financial standpoint, it's self-sustaining. From a skills standpoint, we make sure that people are supported to the point that they can actually continue it on without our direct involvement.
I love it. And it's very difficult to be resilient, in an ever-changing business landscape. Things are changing all the time. What happened to OneSight when COVID hit? What did you experience?
Well, I think like for all of us, we had to very quickly pause, do a reassessment and say, how do we remain true to our mission while making sure that the health and safety of our employees, our patients, our volunteers was always the primary consideration. I think, from the charitable standpoint, in terms of, it wasn't really a good time to take teams of volunteers around the world. So we did take a pause on that. We very, very quickly rewrote all of our hygiene protocols, whether that was in our clinics or in our vision centers, to make sure that everyone had the right PPE. We changed our clinic flow for social distancing, all the sanitation. And I have to say, we were actually one of the first organizations to get back out in the world last September to start giving care again on a charitable basis. On the Sustainable Vision Center standpoint, I'm very, very happy to say that almost all of them remained open this entire time. Obviously, there were some restrictions on care. Sometimes, if there was an outbreak, we had some temporary closures, or we had restrictions on how many patients could come in. But actually, our vision centers remained open, and they remain open to today. I have to say, Kevin, also, this is where, again, a testament to the strength of the team. We had plans to actually expand our footprint last year. Obviously that got delayed a bit, but, the teams looked at it and said, well, how do we do this in a way that's still COVID safe? Normally we fly people in to provide some of the clinical training. Couldn't do that. Normally we bring people together to provide some of the other training. Couldn't do that. So we actually turned it on its head and said, well, what can we do? And what can we do through remote learning? What can we do with local talent? How can we get out? And maybe we don't open 5 at once, but we go to each center individually, which on the one hand, you would think would be less efficient, but the team found ways to do it that actually turned out to be more efficient. And so while they may not have opened in March and April of last year, we got every one of our vision centers opened last year as planned. It was more like November, December. But again, I think when you have a mission to which you're committed, you think differently. And I have to say that I think there were some great learnings for us last year that we might not have uncovered if we hadn't been forced to innovate and look at it differently.
That's interesting. So are you crediting the mission to why you made the decisions to stay in business? And like, that's a bold decision at that time, right? Because everything was kind of shut down. We weren't really sure what was going on, but you made the decision to stay operating in these areas. Were you able to rely upon the mission, or walk us through that conversation in that room for why you decided to continue operating the way you were?
So again, it goes back to the impact of what we do, right? And if you think about the service that we provide, it's medical care, right? It's just as some of the other essential medical care was. And, I think for us, we also, particularly as things started to evolve and we started to look ahead to when will there be a recovery? What will that look like? We can see, and we're all still seeing this, that many, many people were hurt by the pandemic. And so again, as we look at people, children who've been out of school and are trying to learn in a different way, and we know that people are falling behind, many, many people have lost jobs and are trying to retrain for new jobs. We want to make sure that vision is not a barrier to that. And so helping to ensure that kids get the eye exams we need. We can't get out there and screen 20,000 kids in a school the way we normally do. But, the team created an online vision check to at least have, and it's not, the substitute for an eye exam, but it is something that can say, hey, parents, if your child is struggling, let's see if maybe vision is an aspect of it. And if so, now you know that maybe you need to get to an optometrist, when they're open again. Or if you can't get to an optometrist, let us know and see if we can help. As people are trying to build new skills and get back into the workforce, we want to make sure that they have all the tools to do that. So, for us, we really feel like this is a critical and essential service. And that's true whether you're talking about Cincinnati, Ohio, or Kigali, Rwanda.
What did you learn that in 2020 that you probably didn't know that you could do? Like, what I think, and while you're thinking about this, like, I think of America as, one of its greatest exports is philanthropy. We're able to send people to these destinations. We're able to donate and contribute to a lot of the problems that we perceive that are going on around the world. So when something like this happens, you have to build up, because a lot of the Americans cannot go over there, or money gets tight. We saw major losses in contributions to nonprofits all around the world. What did you learn from the loss of that you didn't think was possible?
Well, again, there's a loss, but there's also just a redirection, right? When you find different ways to do things. So, for example, even here in the US, we're still not flying people around because, again, health and safety are the top priority. But because we do believe that we can be part of the solution at a community level, we've been focusing on places where we know that there are communities in need. Honestly, along with all of the discussion last year and ongoing around, racial injustice and social injustice, again, we want to be a part of the solution at that community level. And so we've really been looking for opportunities to work in communities where we know there is need. And we build from the local community volunteers. And we bring people together that way, where we know that they're making a difference in their own backyard. And the need is there.
You kind of make the comparison with the activism going on here and then maybe around the world. When we think about one of your A's, awareness, do you see the same type of awareness campaigns or activism or wants and needs and desires, maybe pertain to even the SDGs, from Rwanda and sub-Saharan Africa to the United States? And how do you utilize this movement, this activism, this passion to affect change in your areas?
So, again, I think that, there are certain things that are common all around the world, And then there are certain things that are specific to different communities and populations. And so, the focus on some of those messages may differ. But again, from a OneSight perspective, we really want to drive awareness of how vision can be a part of the solution and how it can really drive people to be able to unlock their own potential and how we can help, provide that.
So we're talking about education, businesses, productivity, with so many different things that impact each other. How do you just sit back and do you have to work with other different solutions to make sure they can get these glasses? Let's take, for instance, education.
Yeah.
If people don't have meals, they're also not going to be able to be as productive in school. So hunger is a problem that affects education. Gender equality affects education. Climate affects education. War, like all these different things. So around awareness, like how difficult is it to keep that clear message of vision? And do you have to work with other, nonprofits in the area or government municipalities to make sure you can affect the change that you want through, clear eyes?
So we are huge believers in partnership. I say all the time that I really believe in the power of 1 + 1 = 3,000. So, if you think about, the way we do our work, today, we're either partnering with a local government, or even if we're, doing work in a local community, we always have a local partner on the ground who can help make sure that we're serving, we're identifying and serving the people in the greatest need. But what you're talking about is even broader than that. And it is something we just love to do, which is, there are a lot of other organizations who are working equally as hard to serve the needs of those who are lacking in one way or another. And so, again, whether that's in the US or whether that's, in another country around the world, we're constantly looking for people who have a similar or related mission in the sense of we're serving the same communities. Or, as you said, it might be food insecurity or education. And we look for those common links. If someone is working to ensure that, all the children in a village or in a country have, access to a good education, we love to work with them because we know that our work supports theirs and vice versa. So absolutely, we have those conversations all the time, and we're always looking for others who are interested in collaborating.
So it seems like the consistency is really key in terms of your process for these individual locations. Working with those members on the ground was huge for you in 2020. Is there like a core process that you like to articulate, or from a leadership lens, how do you create consistency in all these different areas?
So it's really a balance. And I think anybody who's worked across national borders knows this is, on the one hand, we've had tremendous learning from, the over 200 vision centers that we've now opened and the thousands of clinics that we've done over the years. And so we want to always make sure that we're leveraging that learning and we're putting in, the strong principles that we know. But at the same time, you always have to be flexible, right? I mean, nothing is cookie cutter because we want to make sure that we're always reacting to the needs of that particular population or that particular location or situation.
And how do you choose those locations? Out of curiosity, is it like a need? Is it the government? Like what is it specifically that you're looking for in these new locations?
So, so from our sustainable programming standpoint, we're always looking at, first of all, where is the greatest need, right? Where do you have the highest levels of need for glasses and the lowest level of care available? But then we also look to ensure that, wherever we go, that we can make it sustainable. So, if we're going to set up a system of vision centers, that we've got a strong partnership with the government so that we know that eventually it's going to be sustained and we're going to leave that long-term solution in place for the citizens of that country. When we look at it from a charitable programming standpoint, again, the need and where we can make the greatest impact is always going to be a huge factor. But at the same time, again, this gets back to partnerships. We're working with a lot of different partners who say, I want to make a difference in my community. And so that can be a factor for, okay, well, this is a great place that we can go and there's a particular community of need, whether that is a refugee population, whether that is a marginalized community. where we look at it and we say we have the opportunity to really, make a difference by bringing clear sight to a particular population.
And 1.1 billion is just such a lofty goal. How far away do you think we are from providing glasses to the rest of the world? And what is business's role, being that it's global, supply chains are all across the world? How can businesses also contribute to this cause? And how far away do you think we are from giving glasses to the people that need it most?
So I'll tell you, it is a huge number. OneSight is not the only, fantastic organization working against this. And again, this gets back to collaboration, both within the vision care sector and beyond. There is no one organization that is going to solve this problem on their own. This is why I say partnership is 1 + 1 = 3,000. And private sector is a really important partner to be a part of that. I think that, all of the things you just mentioned, supply chain systems, innovations, technologies, all of those things are important elements, and we really welcome those partnerships. I will tell you that there is a goal out there that for sure by 2050, we want to make sure that every person, every one of those 1.1 billion people who needs glasses has them. And that's a shared goal of a number of NGOs and companies who work in this space. And we are looking for ways. I'm part of a coalition that is looking at how do we bring those synergies together, and how do we reach out and find others, in the private sector, in the public sector, who can partner with us to accelerate those efforts.
So is one of the large problems just distribution? Like, I would assume we have the capacity to create 1.1 billion pairs of prescription glasses. But is distribution the problem? What are you working on with your co-ops, and what are some plans to distribute these glasses to these remote areas?
So, yes to all of the above. So from a capacity standpoint, there will need to be some step changes in economies of scale. There will need to be some new technologies, because again, it's not just about producing the glasses. It's really about ensuring the quality of care. And so that, everyone who has a vision problem, first of all, we have an ethical responsibility to make sure that, if they have something bigger going on, that we identify it and we can create that pathway to referral so that they get the care. I can tell you, we find people at our clinics and at our centers who have, much bigger health issues going on, whether that be a cardiac issue or diabetes or things like that. Those show up in an eye exam. And so we want to make sure that we're properly providing the care to people. But then beyond that, like I said, you can't just hand out the same set of glasses to everyone. We have to make sure that they have the right, we call it refraction, and get a prescription. So that is a piece of it. Distribution is absolutely a piece of it. But if you go back to those 3 A's I mentioned, there's also a huge awareness. There are literally people who do not realize that their vision is a problem. You hear kids say it all the time. They look at leaves on trees, and if you think about how a child draws a tree and it's just a big green blob, well, that's how they see it. And so one of the most common things we hear after they get glasses is, wow, I can see the individual leaves. You talk to older people, whether it's in Africa or Asia, they just say, that's just sort of what happens to your eyes when you get older. So there's a huge awareness issue. And then the affordability is an enormous, barrier. It's not as enormous as people would think, though, right? So a major study was done 2 years ago that said an investment of $14 billion could solve this issue. And while that sounds like a big number on the surface of it, when you put it into the scope of some of the other global healthcare issues we're facing, again, not even mentioning COVID, but AIDS and malaria, 14 billion is a drop in the bucket. And with a solution, don't need to or a new medicine. We have a solution.
It's interesting to think about. I was having a conversation with somebody who was talking about funding like impact investments, and he says, we've had this narrow conversation about profitability, and that it has to be profitable. But when you think about the problems that we want to solve as impact investors, people are willing to risk hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars in investment that they could potentially risk and lose versus, contributing to a nonprofit with a sustainable enterprise. So why is it, do you think, there's such a large gap from investors who want to do good in the world and are willing to put their money to businesses that are unprofitable and could be, potentially harmful for society, versus taking a look at nonprofits with sustainable standards to actually solve some of the greatest problems, which in turn would contribute to better
so much more,
supply chain,
right?
more productivity?
No, that's such an important question, Kevin. And I think it's a huge opportunity for our sector, including for OneSight, because, I shared some of the numbers earlier about the impact on a child's ability to learn. And again, you start looking at, the impact on graduation rates and contribution to society. I shared that $410 billion number in lost global productivity. I think what we have the opportunity to do is tie that together in a stronger story that can make that direct link for people like impact investors, because there is a very clear story there. And I'm not sure we've told it in the way that we need to.
Yeah. How would you elaborate on that a little bit?
So I think that it is really about putting together, there's clear cost estimates in terms of what could go into the different aspects of solving the problem, whether that's around glasses or other care. Like I said, one global study called it at 14 billion. But even if you were to break that down into its components, and you can actually even look at it almost down to the individual level. And then if you start to tie that back to, so therefore, what's the return on that? As you start to look at, what is the impact on a student or a population of students, or what is the impact on a population of workers' productivity, and how can you translate that into the economic impact? I think you can start to build an ROI. We've done, I think, a very good job of talking about the social ROI, but I think when you start getting down into the economic ROI, we probably need to sharpen the pencil a little bit more.
I love that. And maybe the biggest concerted effort that's out there right now is the 17 UN SDGs. Have you found that these goals have been helpful in terms of partnerships, in terms of identifying these issues, funding, ESG investments? How have you found these goals to be helpful within your operating model?
Well, as I said before, I think there's now a more recent but strong realization about the impact of vision on many of those SDGs. And so I think it has opened up a lot of conversations around partnership and how, the work that we do in this sector and as OneSight fuels some of the work toward those goals. OneSight is a part of a group, the United Nations Friends of Vision, which is literally working with a number of the UN ambassadors to further, the advocacy for vision because of the direct impact on the SDGs. So I think it has shifted the discussion to a slightly different plane. And I think it's a good thing because, again, you start to talk about some of that global impact, which is linked to so many other factors.
And I'm thinking about like the corporate partners that you could be partnering with. And with these new goals out, a lot of organizations are trying to adopt many of these goals, but the way we kind of like to look at it is, okay, are these goals do they fall underneath the CMO or do they fall underneath the COO? Is it actually in their operating model, or just is it in their marketing model? Is it greenwashing potentially?
So it depends on the partner, right? So I am a very big believer that when we partner with someone, particularly a corporate partner, we say it has to be a win-win-win. So clearly we want to come together to make it a win for the patient. It's wonderful for OneSight if someone wants to sponsor some of our work because that helps us further our impact. But it has to be a win for that business, right? It has to either support some of their goals, whether it could be some of their corporate social responsibility goals. It could be, some of their employee engagement goals. It could be simply about building their equity with their other customers or in their community. So we really always want to engage with them to understand what are their goals and how do we, how can we be a positive part of their advancing those goals? So depending on what that is, it could live in a number of different places. Again, you've got a lot of companies right now that are really focused on engagement. They were before COVID. I think it's becoming an even greater discussion now. You've got a lot of younger workers who care a lot that their company is giving back. You've got a lot of people moving around. And so, retention is an issue. And, we have a lot of opportunities that, we can really get employees involved and have them feel great about their employer. We have data that show that, 82% of people who get involved with OneSight efforts, it actually improves their view of their employer. And that's pretty powerful. On the other hand, we work with others who, simply want to be a part of giving back to the community. And they use this as a part of their CSR guidelines, or, they've built marketing campaigns about what they're doing. And again, it furthers their equity as a brand or company that cares.
2020 was a really turbulent time for a lot of corporations and a lot of just small business, every business in general. What type of leadership do we need now in this world to get back to where we were to achieve these goals by 2030?
I think there's a couple aspects. First of all, I know, you're real leaders. And so when I think about what is a real leader, I think it goes to your question, right? Which is, first of all, you always have to have someone who is thinking about the mission and values of their organization, whether it's nonprofit or for-profit. But they also have to have a clear vision for how they're going to bring that mission to life to make true impact. And then I would say, probably most importantly, they need to be able to work alongside all the members of their organization in order to actually bring that to life. And when you talk about 2020, I have to tell you, I actually think that last piece is very, very critical. We spent a lot of time last year, not only figuring out, what are we going to do? What do we change? What gets shut down? What doesn't? But we also spent a lot of time really checking in to make sure that our employees were okay and that they knew that they were valued, because none of this gets done without people. I'm a very big believer in the concept of servant leadership, where my role is actually to enable the others in the organization, because when they're enabled and empowered and build their capacity, so much more gets done, right? And again, I think in turbulent times like we're still going through, that connection to the individuals becomes critical.
Did you realize that more in 2020, or was this a philosophy you've always had and it just happened to show?
I've always believed that thinking about your organizational strategy is a business building strategy. Again, it goes back to that statement of, none of this gets done without people. If you're not investing in people, then you're not going to actually, have the strengths and the capabilities to deliver at the same level. So I have always had that. I think, certainly 2020, I think for all of us brought about, there's a human element too, of just making sure we're all okay. It's been a rough year, right? Not only worrying about people's physical health, trying to keep them from getting sick, but there was a huge mental health aspect of this past year. And again, it's still continuing. Some of my teams are right now living through a third wave that is horrible. They're still getting sick. Their loved ones are getting sick. And so it's been really important. And I've tried as a leader to make sure that people understand that it's just as important that they're taking care of themselves as it is that they're taking care of their jobs.
Impactful. KT, it's been a pleasure having you on today. I've learned a lot. On that last answer, you talked about vision, you talked about mission, identifying a clear purpose, and servant leadership. So let's bring this home, KT Overbey. What is your definition of a real leader?
Well, I probably already gave it to you. But again, I think those elements are critical. It is being focused on a mission or a purpose that doesn't waver in the middle of changing economic conditions or changing, day-to-day challenges. I think as a leader, you have to be able to see above the day-to-day or the short-term goals, to have a vision to say, where are we going? How do we bring that mission to life? And that could be a one-year vision, but it always has to be rooted in longer term. I tell people all the time, if you don't know if you're going to Boston or Albuquerque, it doesn't matter which bus or train you get on, but you have to know where you're going, right? And for me, that's always rooted in what's going to make the greatest impact. And then lastly, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but making sure that you're bringing that vision to life by investing and working alongside the people, and really looking at that as the most important asset.
KT, I really enjoyed this conversation today. Thanks for being here. For KT Overbey, I'm Kevin Owers, asking you to go out there, bring your mission to life, know where you're going, and always, folks, keep it real. Thanks, KT.
Thanks, Kevin.